Natasha, Australian trust in China has declined pretty steeply in this poll, now viewed even more poorly than Russia. Can you tell us a little more about the findings?
That's absolutely correct. We've seen trust in China fall to record lows in this year's Lowy Institute poll. Only 23% of Australians say that they trust China. That is halved in just 2 years. And then at the same time, we can see only 1 in 5 Australians have confidence in President Xi Jinping to do the right thing. Again, this is halved since 2018. It's a really significant shift that tells a story of the Australia-China relationship declining over the past 2 years.
Yeah, despite those findings, though, the poll also shows that most Australians, 55%, still see China as an economic partner rather than a threat at 41%. So does this suggest to you that the relationship can still be rebuilt, even if it is out of economic necessity?
This is the kind of the difficulty at the centre of this issue, where China is Australia's largest trading partner. We send 30% of our exports there. And there's no kind of future for Australia's economy that doesn't feature a very significant role for China. What we are seeing shift, though, is that the Australian public 2 years ago entirely saw China as an economic opportunity. That number you mentioned, where 50% say that China is an economic partner, that used to be in the 80s. So we are seeing that shift over time with the rise of debates around foreign interference, Huawei, Hong Kong, and many other issues. Having said that, almost all Australians are worried about the level of dependence that Australia has on China's economy. 94% want Australians to look for other markets to reduce that dependence on China.
What about other stronger alliances? Does this anxiety over China translate to perhaps a closer relationship with the United States?
We would think that that might happen, and we can see that Australians are feeling increasingly unsafe and anxious and are turning to friends. So support for Australia's alliance with the United States is very high and has gone up since last year. Having said that, Australian support for the alliance has always been quite resilient to unpopular US presidents, and Australians remain very sceptical of President Trump and his America First policies.
So what are Australians focusing on this year in 2020 post-pandemic? Because even before the COVID-19 outbreak, we thought that perhaps climate change was going to come to the forefront of Australians' minds, given the incredible bushfires that we saw there. What's catching their attention in 2020?
You're absolutely right. It was thought that 2020 was going to be a debate about climate change policy in Australia after that horrific summer of bushfires. What we can see is that concern about drought is very high. Concern about environmental disasters like bushfires is very high. However, it seems that anxiety about the economy and the COVID-19 pandemic have overtaken that concern about climate change. So last year, climate change was at the top of the list of threats for Australians, and it's now moved quite far down the list, given everything else that has happened.
Yeah, in terms of that, how do Australians now view their country's own reputation around climate?
Well, as you know, these bushfires were broadcast around the world, and there were a lot of concern about the impact it would have on Australia's soft power and its appeal as a destination. We can see that half the country think that our approach to climate change has had a negative impact on our relations in the Pacific, whereas slightly less, but almost half the country say it's had a negative effect on our reputation in the world. There is a sizable proportion of Australians, however, that think Australia's climate policy hasn't affected these relationships or our reputation.
Yeah, more broadly, but still connected to that. So how are attitudes around globalization now? And it's not just to do with the push around action on climate change, but also those other issues that we discussed in terms of trusting China and trust in other Asian neighbours, even the democratic ones.
Yeah, Australia has remained quite resilient to some of those anti-globalization trends in the world, and I think that is surprising given that COVID-19 in many ways is a crisis born by interconnectedness. Having said that, Australians are less trusting of almost all the countries in the world than they have been in the past. particularly if we look at India and Indonesia, that are often touted as important democratic partners for Australia in the post-COVID-19 world. We can see that trust in both of those countries has gone down, and confidence in both President Jokowi and Prime Minister Modi have also gone down. Having said that, there are some exceptions. Australians continue to look at Japan and New Zealand as friends that they can trust and they hold high levels of confidence in.